Guys, and welcome back to the second day of Watercolor Week. I hope you guys are enjoying this little series so far. I know I am enjoying making these videos. This video is going to be all about paper. I'm going to be testing out two different papers. I have one that is $20 and this one which was $2.50, 40% off, and it was only $1.50. That's how much I paid for it. So I'm going to be comparing these two watercolor papers side by side, and I hope it helps you out. Just as a disclaimer, I don't think you need the most expensive paper or the most expensive materials in general. I've heard a lot of watercolor artists say that you should definitely spend more on your paper than you spend on your paints. You definitely, at the very least, need a watercolor paper if you're going to be painting with watercolors, but that's not to say that you need the most expensive watercolor papers. I've even heard people painting on Bristol board with watercolors. I just think you need a heavyweight paper that can handle water. That's my philosophy on watercolor paper. But yes, that was just a disclaimer saying I'm not saying that you need to go out and buy the most expensive materials or watercolor paper. I just think it's interesting to compare them side by side. Anyway, enough about that. I hope you guys enjoy this video. So to compare these in a fair way, I decided to run a side-by-side series of tests, just testing like the basic limitations of what watercolor paper can do and testing different techniques on them and seeing how they handle those. So in this first test, I'm just testing the basic function of what a watercolor paper should do, and that is just making flat wash and seeing how they handle an even color laydown. So obviously these papers have two different textures to them, but other than that they are pretty spot on and the same in their smooth color laydown. I can see a little bit more vibrancy in the colors on the Arches watercolor paper, but it doesn't really pick up on camera and it's very, very minor. The second technique I wanted to test out is called glazing or layering. So on the left side of this little Venn diagram that I drew out, I painted just a base layer of yellow, trying to make it as even as possible. And then after that had dried, I added a pink layer over top to create this nice orange color in the middle. I'd say that these pretty much turned out the same, but if I had to be picky, I think that the Master's Touch side is just a little bit more patchy when it comes to the middle section. The orange is just a little bit more red and yellow instead of a solid unified orange like on the Arches side. The next test is a gradient wash, so the aim of this is just to make the top of the rectangle a darker green while the bottom is a lighter green. Even though I've been picky on the last two tests, I can safely say that the Arches side did at least a little bit better of a job on this. For the Master's Touch side, I had to go back and touch it up a few times, and overall I just had an easier time getting a smooth color laydown on the Arches paper. For this test, I overloaded the paper with water and really scrubbed at the paper with my brush to see how long it could go before it started to get damaged, and the Master's Touch side definitely did not perform the strongest on this. You can see only after a little while it started to pill up and get all crusty. However, the Arches side did really well for this test. It barely pilled up, maybe a little bit. It does have tinier fibers. It just got a little bit of a weird texture to it, but it didn't actually start ripping up the paper. For the last test, you can see that I have masking fluid and masking tape pre-prepared on each paper, and I just wanted to see how each paper could handle the peeling and tearing of masking fluid and masking tape off of the paper, and if it would leave crisp edges or if it would tear. So as you can see, the Master's Touch paper did not fare well with the masking fluid. It peeled the paper back, and I tried going from the other side to kind of like save it, and it just peeled from that side too, so it was just a big disaster and it did not work out. But the Arches paper did not tear even a little bit on this test, and it just gave these really crisp lines, especially with the rectangle in the bottom corner, and so the Arches definitely won on that test. So the winner of these two papers was definitely the Arches watercolor paper, which is no surprise. It's a $20 paper compared to a $2 paper, so I would expect it to be better, of course. But I also don't want to rule out Master's Touch paper as a bad paper because it is $2, and as you can see, it did really well with the basic techniques. You can get a flat, even color on it, you can layer. The only real problem it has is with masking fluid and its durability, and the thing I would say is to avoid using masking fluid on it and make sure you don't overwork your paper, which is something that you shouldn't do anyway. I really hope this video helped you out in deciding what type of watercolor paper would best suit your needs. At the end of the day, you have to get what you can afford, and just because it's a cheaper paper doesn't mean that it's bad. I think you just need to know what you're doing, and you can make good art with it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one.